Ladybird readers. Great inventions. Picture words. Wheel, paper, printing press, vaccine, telephone, light bulb, car, airplane, computer, internet. Introduction. About inventions. An invention is something that nobody has made before, like a new tool or a machine. An inventor is the person who makes it. Can you imagine life before the internet, telephones, or the wheel? Great inventions can change the world. Often, one thing is invented, made for the first time by lots of people. Someone has an idea, and then other people change and improve it and help it to become real. Sometimes, different people try to invent the same thing at the same time. The world is full of important inventions. Look around you. Can you see any? Chapter 1. The Wheel. When was the wheel invented? The oldest wheels in the world were found in Europe and in ancient Sumer, part of Iraq today, and they were made more than 5,000 years ago. Why was the wheel important? Before the wheel was invented, people had to walk and carry things from one place to another. After the wheel was invented, people could travel more quickly and carry their things on carts, so it was easier to travel a long way and move things. How has the wheel changed? The first journeys by wheel were not fun. Early wheels were big circles made of wood, so they were very heavy, and they moved slowly. Later, spokes were invented. Wheels with spokes were much lighter and faster, but passengers in carts could still feel every stone on the road. In 1888, tires, rings full of air, were added around the outside of wheels. Tires were better on rough ground. Why wasn't the wheel invented earlier? Today, wheels are everywhere. In our cars, our clocks, and our electric toothbrushes. But amazingly, sailboats and musical instruments were invented before the wheel. Scientists say people didn't have the tools that they needed to make a wheel before this. Chapter 2. Paper. Who invented paper? Imagine a world before paper was invented. People had to write on big pieces of soft rock, wood, or shells. Many years ago, people in China began trying to make paper. A man called Sai Lun found the best way of making the first real paper. People in other parts of the world soon began to copy Chinese paper making. How was the first paper made? The first paper was made from parts of plants and trees, and bits of old cloth. These were chopped into pieces, mixed together with water, pressed, and then dried in the sun. Fun fact, many banknotes are still made with cloth today. How do we make paper today? Now, people grow forests of special trees for paper. They cut the trees down, chop them into pieces, and use machines to make paper from them. What's the future of paper? Making paper uses lots of trees and lots of water, so it is bad for the environment. Recycled paper, paper that has already been used, is more popular now. Inventors are even trying to make paper from fruits and vegetables like oranges and potatoes. Chapter 3. The Printing Press. What was life like before the printing press? How long do you think it takes to copy a book by hand? That's how people made books 600 years ago. And it was very slow. There weren't many books, and they were expensive. Today, we have printed words all around us, in newspapers and books, on posters, and on cans of food. Who invented the printing press? People in China tried many different ways of printing things before the 15th century. Then, in around 1440, the printing press that changed the world was invented by Johannes Gutenberg in Mainz, Germany. How did the Gutenberg press work? Gutenberg made metal letters which people could put together into words. He put ink on these and then pressed paper on them again and again to make printed pages. Then he moved the letters so that he could make new pages. Why was the printing press important? It was much quicker and cheaper to make books with a printing press. So after 1450, many more people wrote and read books about lots of different subjects, like science and history. Fun fact, more than 500 million copies of the Harry Potter books have been printed. Chapter 4. Vaccines. What are vaccines? You have probably had vaccines at school or at the doctor's to stop you getting dangerous diseases. Having a vaccine is like getting a small amount of a disease. Your body fights away the small amount of disease, so it then knows how to fight away the real disease too. When did people start having vaccines? People started having vaccines many years ago in China and some other countries. People there cut the skin of a healthy person and put in parts from the skin of someone with a dangerous disease. Then, the healthy person did not get the disease. Who invented vaccines? Edward Jenner was an English doctor. In 1796, he tested the vaccine idea with a disease called smallpox and wrote about it. Because of his work, people in many countries were given vaccines and saved from smallpox. How important are vaccines? They are very important. Before 1796, smallpox killed millions of people. When Jenner's vaccine was slowly introduced all around the world, the disease began to disappear. Since 1980, there has been no smallpox, and now there are vaccines for many other diseases too. Chapter 5. The telephone. How important are cell phones? 50 years ago, there were no cell phones. And 150 years ago, there were no telephones at all. Today, most people spend more than 4 hours a day on their cell phones. Who invented the telephone? People often say that Alexander Bell, from the UK, invented the telephone. But several other people were trying to make telephones at the same time. The first words that were spoken by telephone were, "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." That was on March 10th, 1876, and Alexander Bell was talking to Thomas A. Watson, who worked with him. What were the first telephones like? They had one part for your ear and another for your mouth. To make a call, you had to speak to someone called an operator and wait while they connected the telephone lines. How do telephones work today? Telephones and cell phones make electric signals from the sound of a voice. These signals travel by wire or radio wave to another telephone, which makes the sound of the voice from the signal. Chapter 6. The light bulb. How did people see in the dark before the light bulb? For thousands of years, people used candles for light. In the early 19th century, gas lights were used, but these were dangerous. They started many fires and made the air dirty. Who invented the light bulb and when? Thomas Edison, an American, invented the light bulb in 1879. Electric light was invented earlier that century, and many other people were trying to make light bulbs at the same time. But Edison's was the first good one. His light bulb was not too expensive, and it produced light for more than 13 hours. Why was it difficult to make the first light bulb? When Edison connected something called a filament to electricity, the filament burned and became very hot and bright, giving light. He needed to find a cheap filament that burned for a long time, so he and his workers tried using thousands of different things for it. One of the things that they tried was hair from a beard. Fun fact, the filament that burned best was made from Japanese bamboo. So for several years, Edison used that in his light bulbs. Because of this, he is very famous in Japan. Chapter 7. The car. When was the car invented? The first modern car was called the motor wagon, and it was completed by Carl Benz in Mannheim, Germany in 1886. It had 3 wheels and a new type of engine at the back, which used gas. Were there other cars before this? A Frenchman called Cugnot built a car with a steam engine in 1769, but the engine was very heavy. Because of this, the car was slower than going by foot. Back then, it was difficult and expensive to get from place to place, and many people just did not travel. Cars really did change the world. Fun fact, when cars were first invented, people thought that they were very dangerous. In the UK and the USA, a person with a red flag had to walk in front of the car to show people that it was coming. When did the car first become popular? For the first 20 years, only very rich people could buy cars. Then, in 1908, an American called Henry Ford built the Model T, which was light, strong, and less expensive than other cars. Ford sold 10,000 cars in 1908, and by 1923, he was selling nearly 2 million Model Ts a year. Chapter 8. The airplane. What was the first airplane flight like? It was very short. Today, we can fly around the world, but in the first flight, on December 17, 1903, Flyer 1 traveled just 37 meters across the beach at Kitty Hawk in the USA. Orville and Wilbur Wright's airplane only flew for 12 seconds, but it was amazing for everyone. People could fly. Did people fly before this? People began flying in hot air balloons in 1783, and the first airship flew in 1852. But the Wright brothers' flight was the most important one. It was the first flight in an airplane that was controlled, had a gas engine, and was heavier than air. How did the Wright brothers build their airplane? They watched birds, flew lots of kites, and built and tested models before they made a real airplane. They also built a wind tunnel because they wanted to understand how wind affects flight. Fun fact, in 1986, less than 100 years after the first flight, an airplane flew all the way around the world without stopping. Chapter 9. The computer. Who invented the computer? Lots of people. In the 1830s, Charles Babbage, with help from Ada Lovelace, drew plans for the first machine that could do the work of a computer. Babbage never built his machine, but during the next 190 years, lots of people used his ideas to make new computers. What were the first computers like? The first modern computers were as big as a room, and they used lots and lots of electricity. They were used by people in Europe and the USA to do difficult maths during the Second World War. How have computers changed? Computers became smaller and smaller, but they were only used by scientists who understood all about them. Then, these people began to think, perhaps we can build computers that everyone can use. One of the first of these personal computers was made by Apple in 1976. Fun fact, some of the biggest computer companies, HP, Google, Microsoft, and Apple, began in the garages of the people who started them. Chapter 10. The Internet. What is the Internet? And when did people start to use it? The Internet is used to send information very quickly between computers all around the world. It was first used in 1969 in the USA. Like the computer, it was invented by lots of different people. Who invented today's World Wide Web? The Internet that we use today, also called the World Wide Web, was invented by Tim Berners-Lee in 1990. It quickly became very popular. For the first time, people could make and use websites and send emails. What do people use the Internet for today? People use the Internet to search for information, to work, to send emails, and to do their banking. They also shop online, share photos and news with friends, watch TV and films, and much more. What do you use the Internet for? Can you imagine life without the Internet? What's next? More than half the people in the world, about 4 billion, now use the Internet. It was a great invention because it has all the information in the world. What will tomorrow's great invention be? Could you be tomorrow's great inventor?